Hi, I'm Murray Skaman from Bushel Plus and MAD Concaves. Today we're going to go over this John Deere setup, and this John Deere concave configuration fits in everything from the 9660 right up to the 790 John Deeres. So we have two split frames in here and a one piece in the second position, or in the third position, sorry. We have two split frames, and when I say split frames, these are the ones that we can put our inserts into. In the third position, we run a one-piece concave in there, and we usually run the 435, and I'll go over that a little bit more in a minute. And the reason we run a 4-3 or a one-piece in the third position is on the cross augers underneath the concaves, there's a plate that goes across there, and we have to use a one-piece. If we put a split frame in, this tends to come down on the bar, so that's the reason for the one-piece. So with our frames, we have a bolt-on lip on the front that bolts on. So if you ever happen to mess one up or for any reason, you can just get a new one. You don't have to buy a whole concave. And normally in the first position, in wheat, we run a 225 in the front position. And I have one in there already just because my stand's a little bit in the way there. So I've got one in there in that position already. They're very easy to switch in and out. There's a rod in the back side here and two dowel pins, which you can probably see on this one. So to put one in, it's very simple. We put that bar in there so that you can set it on it, and you're not having to reach away in underneath there to get these into place. And it's just a matter of putting that in, and there's two bolts in behind that go in, and that's all there is to putting that concave in. Goes in very easy. And with this system, you're able to leave this split frame in at all times in your combine. So on the new series with active suspension, you never have to recalibrate anything. And they are identical shape to a John Deere. So if you're wanting to use a John Deere one in the third hole, you can. They match up. And you never have to take a frame out. So you don't have to recalibrate. There's no time wasted. And you're able to change these concaves in very quickly. There's only, like I said, the two bolts. And there is actually a third hole in behind here, but that's just for using a punch to line the holes up if you're having a little bit of a trouble in there. Because anything that helps is a good thing. So that's all there is to putting a concave in and out. And I'll just go over what these numbers mean. You see that we have 225 on there? The gap between the bar, this gap that's in here, not the metal part, but the open part, that measures 0.225 of an inch. Like a quarter inch would be 0.25. So this is just slightly tighter than that. And we use this 225 for wheat. It thrashes very hard. Having this flat piece of metal in there is like having two wires together, and it holds the grain better so that it thrashes. And yet there's a big enough hole to let the grain out, because we don't want any rotor loss. We want to let as much grain out at the start as possible. So we run a fairly open one, and in the second hole, excuse me, we'll run a 375 in here, which I'll put in a second. So like I said, that gap represents, the 225 represents the gap in there. On a 435, which is almost half an inch, if it was 0.5, it would be half an inch, and that's this gap that you see. That's what that represents. So we start fairly tight, we go a little bit wider, and then we go right to a 435. And I'll just pick up a 375 so you can see the difference. And you can see they go in and out so nice. They're great. It usually takes me longer to find my 18 millimeter socket to get the bolts out. And speaking of bolts, these bolts have the correct amount of shoulder on them. We used to use bolts that had threads on all the way, and the pounding on the concave all the time would pound it right into the threads, and then you couldn't get the bolts out, and then you'd have to impact them out of there, and it would bugger up the hole and the threads. So we got these bolts specially made that has just the right amount of shoulder in here. So, and they come supplied with the concaves. So you can see the dowel pins here. That's what they're sitting on this end. There's no bolts at this end. the rod in here to guide it in, and 2 bolts. And I'll just leave that one empty now just so you can see what this looks like. So this is our setup for wheat. We got 2 2.5s in the front, 3 7.5s in the second hole, 4 3.5s. And that'll do your wheat. It's going to do a great job. And something that I have found that this first 2 sets of concaves do such a great job. This one is basically just letting it out because it is doing a very good job of thrashing in the front, which we want. We want to get 90% of the grain out in here, and it seems to be doing a good job of that. And if it gets back to here, we've got a nice big one to let it out. So when we get done our wheat, we pull these first 2 concaves out, the 2 2.5s. We'll pull them both out. I'm just going to take one out because, like I said, the stand's kind of in the way on this one. So you take the 2 2.5 out. And for most of your other crops, canola, oats, barley, peas, corn, this one does basically all your crops other than wheat. So we typically use this one in the front. We take the 2 2.5 out and throw this finger grate in. This finger grate has a bar on it, has lots of hole. It'll pop them pods open, you get all the canola out, and we want to get that canola out at the front before it gets over thrashed further back. And you want to let it out at the front, because if you're letting it out in the separator grates, it's going on top of all the chaff and it'll tend to ride right out on the sieves. So we put a finger grate in the front on both sides, and that's going to do basically your oats, barley, canola, peas, beans. It does quite a wide variety of crops. But I have found that if you're seeing pods coming in the hopper and having a little bit of trouble, maybe you're jumping the gun a little bit on getting this canola harvested, that sometimes you have to take this one and put it in the second hole and put the 375 in there. It's just a little more aggressive, and it's going to pop those pods open and do a better job in the hopper. But that's the great thing about this system is you can interchange them. You can put them wherever you want. And if you're seeing, when you drop your drop pan, and you're seeing a little more loss on one side than the other, you could put a wider concave on the side that's not getting as much grain on it, and that'll let more out on one side, and it evens up your grain pan. You get less loss. So it's really great for being able to juggle stuff around, change things, and make your combine perform to the best of its ability. So we do have some other concaves here that I'll just kind of mention. And we also have an alfalfa one. We had the alfalfa guys help us with this one, and after a lot of trial and error, we found this gap, which is approximately 1.5, 1.6, somewhere in there, that does a very good job of popping those whorls open and letting the alfalfa seed out. So when we're doing alfalfa, we'll put 4 of these in the 2 positions here. We'll fill this right up with alfalfa. Seems to work pretty good. Guys are using it all over the world. I got these down in Nevada, up in northern Saskatchewan. They've been working very, very well for alfalfa. So once again, I put 4 of them in the 4 positions here, and I just run that 435 in the back still. One of our other concaves, and this is our old faithful one that we've had for a long time. We used this concave for years and years in canola, and man, it worked great. We used to use it just in the front, but that was for the old canola that shelled out easy or was swathed. But once shatter-resistant canola came along, we found it wasn't aggressive enough. There's no bars, it's just holes, and it just dumps out. So it was working very well because it let it all out at the start. We weren't over-thrashing the straw. Just fabulous. And in the hopper, it was always really nice. It was clean because you weren't pulverizing everything. It would let the pods out with the seeds out, and the sieves had less work because it's a lot easier to separate canola from pods than it is from chaff. So it worked very well, but when shatter-resistant canola came along, it wasn't aggressive enough, and that's where we came up with the finger grate. It's got bars on, it's more aggressive. but we still sell a lot of these. The seed growers like them for their peas and beans. Kernels that are very fragile with, you don't want to break the skin on them, or you'll lose your germination. So some guys will put 4 of these in for their seed production, or they'll run a finger grate in the front just to make sure they're popping the pods open on their beans, and they'll run this in the second hole. Very good one for helping you out with your germinations. This one is a round bar. We use that for corn, and we have used it in beans a little bit. The pods may sneak through there, but if you run a finger grate in front of it, that usually takes care of the bean pods. It's just simply to let stuff out. And you know, they've been using round bars in corn for years, and that's mainly what that one's for. A couple of features that I forgot to mention. On the front of the concave, down here, you'll see that there's some bolts here. So we had a lot of customers complaining about their OME concaves, that on this end, on the OEM ones, this would spread a little bit, and then the keeper would pop out of there, and it would go through the chopper and out the sieves or wherever it went, and did some damage. But you had to shut down and go to town and get another one, unless you really wanted to go to town. So kind of a pain in the butt. So we put these bolts in here, and you can just put them in, you just snug them up just so that never spreads. But we found when we put the extra the extra metal in here, they don't seem to spread very much anyways, but we're still putting the bolts in. It's just an insurance thing. It's not that they're weak, it's just, you just don't want to lose this apparatus. And like I said, I was going to talk a little bit more about this 435. This has been a very good concave. We tried running 375s back here. They were okay, but if you ever got into peas or high yielding oats, barley, or chickpeas, you want to have this 435. This was actually designed for chickpeas. It's the right size to thrash out the chickpeas. And speaking of chickpeas, if you have chickpeas, we like to run, instead of the 375, we'll run a 435 in these 2 holes. And that really looks after those chickpeas. And if you have the 435 in your back pocket, if you're doing, you know, high yielding barley, high yielding oats, even canola, leave the 435 in there. The bigger concave you can use, the better. You want to let as much of whatever crop you're combining, you want to let it out as fast as possible. So the bigger the concave you can use and get away with it, the better. Some of the other features on the frame, just while I'm standing here looking, I saw one. We doubled up the width of the frame on here. It's twice as thick as what an ordinary John Deere OME one is. And we haven't had a frame fail yet. We've had these out for quite a while now, and they're tough. They stand up very well. We haven't had any failures on these at all. It's been great. No warranty for me is always a plus. And with that completes our video for today. And if you have any questions, give us a call at Bushel Plus and MAD Concaves. We'll talk to you later.